Well, good morning. And welcome to Pacific Unitarian. It is good to see you here today. Today, we welcome the Reverend Dr.JayAtkinson as our guest speaker. Reverend Atkinson has retired from full-time UU ministry and as an adjunct professor from Meadville Lombard and Starr King. He still serves Starr King as a research scholar, focusing on UU history. My name, Leanne Hart, your worship associate for today. We represent progressive religious thought here in the South Bay. We welcome people of all creeds, races, sexual orientations, and gender identities. We gather here in this sacred space on the ancestral lands of the Tongva people. We strive to be better stewards of the land that we are honored to inhabit. If anyone is here for the first time, we welcome you and want you to know that we have religious education for school-age children and childcare for preschoolers. Brunch is served on the patio after the service. Your first time here is free of charge. Okay, I have a few announcements, and I want you to know that the events I'm going to tell you about all will occur during this next week. So this is all coming up quickly. The South Bay Chamber Music Society is being held today at 3 o'clock right here. This is a special concert. The Thieves Consort will be exploring how 3 Soviet composers preserved and created art under the fist of Stalin. The greatness of these works sends a hopeful message that art will prevail even under the oppressive regimes. The food packing service that takes place here every Monday at 12:45 will be canceled tomorrow due to the President's Day holiday, so don't show up to help tomorrow. Kiki Wiley will offer community yoga tomorrow, Monday at 10 a.m. here in the sanctuary, complete with a sound bath. If you haven't done this before, you want to give it a try. The Social Justice Zoom planning meeting takes place Monday, tomorrow, at 5 p.m. The link to that meeting is in the newsletter. Then on Thursday, our own Dr. Haven Perez presents a dynamic lecture on modern identities and ideologies. It's going to be at 4 o'clock. That's a time change, 4 o'clock in the library Thursday. This coming Saturday, February 22nd at 10 a.m., we will present our first Pacific Death Cafe. Now, at a death cafe, people drink tea, eat cake, and discuss death. Come and enjoy the fun. Later that same day, our perennial favorite, the Black and White concert, will occur. Yeah, let's hear it. Yay! The Black and White. Yes, even though they say nothing is black and white, this is. So everybody wear some black or white and remember to bring a black or white dessert with you. Tickets are for sale right now in the office, and then on the patio after the service, they will still be available. Our pledge drive begins February 23rd, and it ends on March 16th. In order to facilitate your ability to spread more love throughout the year, we have moved the annual auction to September 20th. Now, I know you'll never be wondering about the auction after this. We have moved it to September 20th. Okay. And check your newsletter for regular events. Now is time for our chalice lighting. Today, a poem by Stuart Kestenbaum called Holding the Light. Gather up whatever is glittering in the gutter, whatever has tumbled in the weeds or fallen in the flames from the sky. For it is not only our hearts that are broken, but the hearts of the world as well. Stitch it back together. Make a place where the day speaks to the night and the earth speaks to the sky. Whether we created God or God created us, it all comes down to this. In our imperfect world, we are meant to repair and stitch together what beauty there is. Stitch it with compassion and wire. See how everything we have made gathers the light inside itself and overflows? It's a blessing. Please stand as you are willing and able for our opening hymn, number 539, When We Are Gathered. 359, When We Are Gathered, but it's up here. I'd now like to invite Dr. Haven Perez up for the Story for All Ages and invite all the young and young at heart to come down to the carpet.
Good morning. The Emperor's Seed. There was once an emperor who had no children and needed to choose a successor. Thousands of children from across the kingdom came to the palace and were surprised when the emperor exclaimed that he was going to choose one of them. He gave them all a seed. They were to go home to their villages, plant the seed in a pot, and tend for it for a year. When they return in a year, the emperor would judge their efforts and choose his successor. There was a boy named Ling who received his seed and returned to his village. His mother helped him choose a pot and put some soil into it. Ling watered his pot every day. Once a week, the children of the village would get together to compare their plants. After a few weeks, there were signs of life, but in Ling's pot, there was no sign of life. The weeks passed, and Ling continued to water his pot every day. After a few months, the pots really came to life. Some had trees starting to grow. Some had flowers. Some had leafy shrubs. Poor old Ling still had nothing growing in his pot, leading the other children to make fun of him. Ling continued to water his pot every day. A year passed, and it was time to return to the palace to show what had grown and decide on the new heir. Ling was anxious as his pot still showed no signs of life. But if they punish me, they won't know that I've watered it every day. They'll think that I'm lazy. His mother looked at him in the eye and explained that whatever the consequences were, had to return and show the emperor his barren pot. Ling and the other children entered the palace gates. By now, some of the plants were looking magnificent, and the children were wondering which one the emperor would choose. Ling was embarrassed as the other children looked at his lifeless pot and scoffed. The emperor came out and started to make his way through the crowd, looking at the many impressive trees, shrubs, and flowers that were on display. The boys all puffed their chests out and tried to look as regal as possible, hoping that they would be chosen as the heir to the empire. Then the emperor came to Ling. He looked at the pot, then he looked at Ling. "What happened here?" he asked. "I watered the pot every day, but nothing ever grew," Ling muttered nervously. Then he moved on. After a few hours, the emperor finally finished his assessment, looking at the wonderful grown plants. He stood in front of the children and congratulated them on their efforts. "Clearly, some of you desperately want to be emperor and would do anything to make that happen. But there is one boy that I would like to point out, as he has come to me with nothing. Ling, come here, please." "Oh no," thought Ling. He slowly sauntered to the front of the group, holding his barren pot. The emperor held up the pot for all to see, and the other children laughed. Then the emperor continued, "A year ago, I gave you all a seed. I told you to go away, plant the seed, and return with your plant. The seeds that I gave you were boiled until they were no longer viable and wouldn't grow. But I see before me thousands of plants and only one barren pot. Integrity and courage are more important values for leadership than proud displays. So Ling here will be my heir." Thank you. All right. Go learn something.
Now is the time for candor.
come to a congregation like this to share our life joys and sorrows with one another, but also to remember the wider world we live in. People are losing their jobs. People in countries around the world dependent on U.S. aid have had their hopes dashed by the cancellation of aid. People are being fired for no good reason. It is a time of anxiety, time of sadness for me, many of you, time in our nation, our world, when we wonder what the future holds. But in the midst of these troubling times, there are things of hope to remember. The blessings of the sun rising every morning. The song of a bird as heard perhaps first time. Stillness of the night. The smile of a baby offered to you as if he had been waiting. The faithfulness of lovers and friends. The hand outstretched in reconciliation, touching through barriers of a stranger. Healing again and again. The persistence of love. Be some moments of silence among us now as we think on these things. Well, before the reading, let me say that I'm pleased to be here this morning, and I thank Joshua for inviting me to fill the pulpit on his Sunday off. I used to live here. I live in Northern California now, but I used to live here in the Pacific Southwest, serving the Church of Studio City for 12 years. And it's a pleasure to be back and driving over some of the familiar streets that I remember, still finding my way around. The reading that I have to offer you this morning is from a book called Proverbs of Ashes, written jointly by Rita Nakashima Brock and Rebecca Ann Parker. Some of you perhaps recognize the name Rebecca Parker. For almost 25 years, she was president of our UU seminary in Northern California, in Berkeley, Star King School for the Ministry. But before she came to Star King as president. She was a Methodist minister, serving a small church in the Puget Sound area. She came to that church right after her finishing her doctoral degree. She was a very young woman, and she tells the story that I'm going to read to you about an incident that happened in the early years of her ministry in that little Methodist church. Here's what she says. It was the early 1980s, and anti-gay sentiment was heating up in our city. On the national scene, our denomination was preparing to pass legislation that denied ordination to those who were lesbian and gay. Chuck and Pat, a gay man and a lesbian woman in the congregation, came up with an idea for what we should do in this climate. Both of them were active in the church, making important contributions to its life and its ministry, but they had kept a low profile about their sexual orientations. They were out only to me and a few of their friends in the church. Chuck worked for a school district where he would be fired if it were publicly known that he was gay. There were no legal protections in place for him. They wanted to see the church take a proactive stance in support of lesbians and gays. I liked their idea and invited them to present it at the next board meeting. Tuesday night came around. After preliminary business was taken care of, the board chair called on Chuck and Pat. Each of them came out to the board and told what it was like to be a gay person in a society where the presence of gays was not welcome. They explained how much the church meant to them and how they wanted its fellowship to be more available to people in the gay community. Then they proposed that the church start a support group for lesbians and gays, and that we publish a welcome in the local newspapers, especially the gay press. The first response of the board was thundering silence. Then Cecil, the lay leader of the congregation, stood up. Cecil had known poverty as a child and the sting of being called poor white trash. He had quit school after the 8th grade to go to work. He was a tough survivor, a self-taught man. The tattoos on his arms were from his years in the Merchant Marine. No one ever stood up at board meetings. The meetings tended to be informal, but Cecil cleared his throat to make a speech. The Bible is perfectly clear on this question, he said, speaking with firmness. I held my breath, says Rebecca. I had no idea where he was going with this. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, and as far as I know, he put no restrictions on who our neighbor is. I move that we do as Chuck and Pat have proposed. There will be some in our church family who will not understand such an action. It will not fit with their understanding of what it means to be a Christian or of how they read the Bible, and we will lose our relationship with them. But if we do not do this, we will lose our relationship to God. The board members began to talk. They talked and talked and talked. Someone said finally, let's vote. The vote was unanimous in favor of the proposal with one abstention. The board asked me to preach a sermon the following Sunday announcing the decision. It was the first Sunday in Advent. The standard lectionary text from the Bible for that day was the first letter of John. Whoever says, "I am in the light," while hating a brother or sister, is still in the darkness. Whoever loves a brother or sister lives in the light. And I invite you now, as we sing to remain seated as we sing our centering hymn. Number 34, if you need the music. Let inward love guide every deed, and by this worship we are freed. That closing line of our hymn, just as it may guide us today, could very well have been sung by Cecil in that little Methodist church more than 40 years ago. For me, Cecil is the model of someone who deeply knows what is right and what the true foundation of his church is. Maybe he understands the fear and prejudice that he sensed around him. Maybe he even shares some of it. But he keeps his eyes on the prize. He stays focused on what I would call the soul or the sacred identity of his little church. How does a church lose its soul? In that story of Cecil's congregation, people were initially moved by their personal fears and their prejudices before Cecil called them back to their best selves, their better angels, perhaps. But what if Cecil hadn't been there? And said what he said? A congregation, without being reminded sometimes of what it's there to do, can go astray, not only through fear or prejudice, but by misunderstanding or petty disagreements or greed and lust for power, or simply avoiding conflict and discomfort. And when that happens, they lose their souls. It was loss of soul that derailed Christianity itself when, after 300 years, Christian leaders got into bed with the Roman Empire. Christianity became the religion of the Roman Empire. And as a result, Christian self-understanding became lastingly scarred. Think of the near genocide that the Christian Crusades waged against Muslims in the Middle Ages for nearly 2 centuries. Think of the thousands of so-called heretics, some of them our Unitarian ancestors, in the 16th century who were tortured on the rack and burnt at the stake for their beliefs. And it's not just a thing of the past, of course. We see this all around us in today's climate of religious bigotry and Christian nationalism. In an issue of the Christian Century newsletter last fall, a Christian minister named John Pavlovitz wrote, "We are experiencing a national poverty of empathy in this country. And sadly, that deficit is evident in organized Christianity more than anywhere." Continuing, he writes, "It seems that many of the loudest people are the ones who have most passionately embraced a theology of cruelty, exclusion, and malice, one that bears no resemblance to Jesus. Instead of being known for empathy and love for diverse humanity, many self-identified Christians are obstacles to bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice." And let's not be smug. We Unitarian Universalists have not been immune from some of these kinds of sin. I would remind you of those Unitarians back in New England in the early 1800s up to the 1860s. Unitarians of that era were many of them were wealthy Boston Brahmins, huge financial supporters of Unitarian churches, many of them owners of textile factories whose income flowed from cheap cotton picked by enslaved human beings. They didn't want to hear about abolition. Monetary greed could indeed powerfully seduce some of our ancestors from what they claimed to believe or the notions of equality that they claimed to value. What is it that keeps us in touch in a church like this or any UU church with the deepest meanings of our lives, our religious tradition, our sacred identities? Cecil could cite the Bible and the life of Jesus. How do we as individuals and congregations avoid getting sidetracked by petty concerns that are unworthy of our loyalty? How do our UU churches stay focused on what is most truly and deeply important? A religious congregation like this one, like many others, exists for a purpose. It exists to be and to do something. And most of our UU churches express that purpose in a mission statement. Words that remind us of what we intended to do when we first organized the church and why it is that we continue to commit our time and our gifts and our treasure and our loyalty to its ongoing well-being. Now, you know about all of that, I hope. I looked on your congregation's website to see what your mission statement said. How many of you could tell me? Whoops. Here's what it said on your web. Oh, there you go. Okay. Oh, is it in the order of service? Okay, good. Here's what I found on the website. Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church is an inclusive, liberal religious community and a welcoming congregation. We are committed to valuing people and encouraging their spiritual, ethical, and individual development. We gather as a welcoming, progressive congregation where all are free to speak their truth and meaning. We put our UU principles into practice by nurturing the spirit, creating community, and working for justice in the world. That statement especially points to an ethic of the common good. And ideally, whenever your board of trustees or some committee or you as a congregation as a whole are coming up to make a decision about which there is disagreement, the purpose of the mission statement is to be read at such a time and see what clarity it shines upon the question to be decided. We don't belong to a UU church to boost our own egos, to go on a power trip, or to act selfishly against the good of the whole. The church has a purpose and a mission that lifts up our eyes to a higher vision and asks us to remember that vision when we have something important to decide. And the vision that it lifts up is a matter of soul, the church's soul, matters of sacred meaning and identity. And I think it's the same with our nation also. Remember those closing words of the Declaration of Independence. For the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. A holy covenant, if ever there was one. And we know that many people on both the political right and the left look up to and honor our American ideals with some kind of sacred reverence, however differently they may disagree or see them in practice. Especially since last summer, we've heard a lot about saving the soul of America. Twice in his farewell address, Joe Biden spoke of the soul of our nation and of the torch atop the Statue of Liberty. We, as a religious movement, have our own torch, our chalice, our flame. In that way, the analogy between church and nation is symbolized in the warmth and the image of a flame, either lifted high, as on the East Coast, or cupped in the protective embrace of a chalice. But this concern for the soul of a nation is not anything new. Right after World War I, the British essayist and social critic G.K. Chesterton, maybe some of you have heard of him, was traveling in America right after the war, and when he returned to Britain, he wrote a book called What I Saw in America. And here's some of what he wrote. America is the only nation in the world that is founded on a creed. That creed is set forth with dogmatic and even theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. Perhaps the only piece of practical politics that is also great literature. And he went on a few sentences later to emphasize the point when he wrote that the United States is the nation with the soul of a church. A nation with the soul of a church. That way of thinking about our national identity and perhaps its sacredness suggests that there are some important similarities between protecting and saving the soul of a church and saving the soul of a nation. As a nation, we need to remind ourselves of what the American experiment is all about. If churches remind ourselves of their deepest purpose by looking at a mission, then I would say that our nation, like our churches, also needs a mission statement to keep it from losing its soul. When I was first discussing this sermon with my wife, I asked her if she knew what America's mission statement was. Her suggestion was to boldly go where no one has gone before. Well, there might be some truth in that, because we were the first of all the settler colonists to rebel against European rule. And we were also the first nation ever to have a written constitution, and a constitution that set forth ideals, not simply legalese, but ideals. Those founding fathers, and they were all male at that time, who met in Philadelphia in that summer of 1787, spent, I think, 2 or 3 months hammering out the text that we now know as the Constitution. And there's a legend that as they had announced the result, a woman standing outside of Independence Hall spotted Benjamin Franklin and said to him, "Well, Mr. Franklin, what kind of government have you given us?" And Ben replied, "A republic if you can keep it." A lot of us fear that we have not kept it, or if we have, it's hanging by a thread these days. We learn again and again how fragile a thing is democracy, how fragile is even human civilization. And yet, I think our country does have a mission statement. It's right there in the preamble to our Constitution. I don't know if you ever thought about that as our country's mission statement, but recall what it says, and I bet some of you can even recite it along with me. "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." There you have it, 6 great visionary purposes, or missions, if you will, rooted in 6 aspirational values: unity, justice, peace, security, well-being, freedom. Imagine if every piece of legislation, every judicial decision, every administrative rule and regulation were to be set beside that list of values and see how it measures up. What kind of nation, what kind of people, what kind of a government would we have or be? Well, we know that mission statements or lists of values in churches and in nations are useless if we don't pay attention to them, if we don't honor them, if we don't look back at them and measure up ourselves against them from time to time. Checks and balances, as our nation's founders knew, are useless unless they operate under some commitment to the common good. They require leaders who lead and live and govern with honesty, integrity, and respect for others. Those same virtues that were celebrated in the earlier story that Haven read to the children. Only Ling exhibited the honesty, the integrity that the emperor was looking for in his successor. Compare that kind of integrity with what we have now. A capitalist value system that seeps into nearly every aspect of our lives, replacing kindness with competition, moral integrity with greed, concern for the common good with the ideology of unregulated power for the wealthiest, What is happening at the highest levels of our government, federal government, strikes at the very root of our democratic process. The motive value of capitalism is self-interest. Adam Smith clearly recognized and stated that, but he managed to convince himself that it was somehow limited or self-correcting by the operation of what he envisioned as an invisible hand. We now see how profoundly wrong that theory was. Capitalism without outside regulation becomes a monster without a soul, a monster that pursues not happiness for all, as the Declaration of Independence says, nor the common good, but the amassing of wealth and power for the few. So how do we save our souls as individuals, as religious congregations, as a nation? I look at this flame here, burning in the chalice, and think of all the ideals that it stands for. Is it too sappy to think that somehow a politics of love could be our salvation? I think of Cecil reminding his people of his church that love of neighbor is what is fundamental, not a phrase coming out of Washington, D.C. these days. And I think also of the action of our UUA General Assembly last June, when UU congregations voted to declare that love is at the center of all that we do. And you have a reminder of that in the graphic in your order of worship this morning. We are indeed living in a dark time. But the Sikh activist, that's S-I-K-H, Sikh, the religious Sikhs, the Sikh activist Valerie Carr asks us to look beyond the present moment and push forward with what she calls revolutionary love. She is very explicit in saying that our action must be like the action of labor in delivering a child. We have to keep pushing forward. What if our present moment can give birth to a revolution, a new era of revolution, she asks. What if our present darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? You know that already lawsuits are moving forward. I changed this paragraph almost hour by hour as I was finishing this sermon, because more and more lawsuits are being mounted and delaying or perhaps halting entirely some of the worst actions of this administration. Judges are responding. Thursday, USAID was restored temporarily, but we hope permanently, by an injunction. Just last, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, our Unitarian Universalist Association joined with 28 other national religious bodies to sue multiple government agencies for intimidation of people exercising their freedom to worship in safety. And I have heard that in the DC area, some of our Unitarian Universalist congregations are experiencing a drop in Sunday attendance for fear of the people that they may be surveilled. I'm happy to say that in most congregations in California, what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that exactly the opposite is true. Our churches have been filled up with people wanting, yes, solace, but also wanting to know what they can do, whom they can join their hands with, how they can be allies to all of the people who are suffering from the actions of this institution. But I wonder how long it will take before millions of working people who cast their votes for Donald Trump will realize, as David Brooks wrote just 2 days ago in the New York Times, that their supposed hero, quote, doesn't give a crap about the working class. How long will it be before masses, people by the millions, including many of us, I hope, as both victims and allies, take to the streets in protest against the bill of goods, the jar of snake oil that we have been sold, the tyranny that is being foisted upon us? The black philosopher and political commentator Cornel West famously says that justice is what love looks like in public. Justice is what love looks like in public. And our call is to make that transformation of love into justice that is visible and powerful and real in people's lives. So it requires political action. It requires putting our bodies on the line, perhaps. But sometimes I think that it is the poets who will save us, who will marshal us to greater deeds, who with the power and the eloquence of their words will call us to renewed vision and action, call us out of fear and comfort into courage and the discomfort of placing our hearts and minds and bodies on the line for what must be done to save our souls, individually, as a congregation, as a nation. That's what Walt Whitman did. It's what Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes did. It's what Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Maya Angelou and Audre Lorde did, and Bell Hooks, and so many, many more that you could remember and name. And in the spirit of that call and those prophetic voices of men and women, poets and essayists and eloquent orators, I want to close with the words that brave young woman and poet, Amanda Gorman, remember her? Who spoke 4 years ago at Joe Biden's inauguration. Maybe you remember some of these words. This is the closing of her poem. We will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover, and every known nook of our nation and every corner of our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, when we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid, the new dawn blooms as we free it. For always there is light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And I say, amen. So be it.
Thank you for those words. Now time for our offertory. Your contributions are a tangible commitment to the mission and vision of this congregation. Each time you give, you renew your commitment. And as a result, your support is entwined with all that we believe and all that we do here together. This is its own special gift. In this spirit of trust and generosity, we gratefully accept your offering.
Chance to remember your first kiss. And I was a young girl and never been kissed. I got to thinking it over, how much I had missed. So I got me a guy and I kissed him, and then, oh Lordy, I kissed him again.
I asked her to marry, to be my sweet wife. I told her we'd be happy for the rest of our life. I begged and I pleaded like a natural man, and then, oh Lordy, she gave me her hand. Kisses sweeter than wine.
Working hand in hand to have a good life. We had corn in the field and wheat in the bin, and then, whoops, oh Lord, I was the mother of twins. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine.
Well, all our children, numbered about 4, they all had a sweetheart a-knocking on the door. They all got married, they hadn't that's 8. Oh, Lord, grandfather of 8. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine.
Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Well, now I'm old and I'm walking slow. Get to thinking what happened a long time ago. Had a lot of kids, a lot of trouble and pain, but then, oh Lordy, I'd do it all again. She had, oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine.
For our closing hymn, I have selected number 149 in the gray hymnal, Lift Every Voice. Many of you know this as in a different era, it was called the Negro National Anthem, now more often called the Black National Anthem. And I'm always a little bit self-conscious as a white male to be asking a mostly white congregation to sing this. But its truth, I think, for all of us is even more apparent in this era that we're now in than it has been in the past. And I want to introduce it with just a few words by a black woman who lives in Milwaukee and is the director of an organization called Alice's Garden that provides models of regenerative farming and community cultural development. On the morning of November 6th, past November 6th, the day after the election, she wrote, I'm just going to read some of the words, not the whole thing. She wrote this: "You are awakening to the same country you fell asleep to. the very same country. Pull yourself together. And when you see me, do not ask me, what do we do now? How do we get through the next 4 years? Some of my ancestors dealt with at least 400 years of this under worse conditions. And I think that is a sobering reminder to many of us about the work that we have to do and the voices that we have to lift hand in hand with Asian and Pacific Islanders, with white, with black, with brown people in our communities all over this country. And so I invite you in that spirit to sing, Lift Every Voice.
Please remain standing and gather together. Let us remember that this church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences and beneath all of our diversity, there is a unity that binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity.
And may the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom. Shalom. Namaste. And blessed be. And now our service truly begins.
I woke up this morning to a garbage truck. Looks like this old horseshoe's done run out of luck. If I came home, would you let me in? Fry me some pork chops and forgive my sin. Surround me with your boundless love. Confound me with your boundless love. I was drowning in the sea, lost as I could be, when you found me with your boundless love. Sometimes the little heart is like a washing machine. It bounces around till my soul comes clean. When I'm clean and hung out to dry, I'm gonna make you laugh until you cry. Surround me with your boundless love. Confound me with your boundless love. I was drowning in the sea, lost as I could be, when you found me with your boundless love. And if by chance I should find myself at risk of falling from this jagged cliff, and I look above, I'm surrounded by your boundless love. Surround me with your boundless love. Confound me with your boundless
So would you like to join us for lunch?
Well, I'm having lunch at 1 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
I'll stay a little while.
Okay, all right. People might want to
Yeah.